President-elect Donald Trump announcing more picks for key positions and planning to declare a national emergency to implement his mass deportation program. Iris Tao joins us now live from West Palm Beach. Good evening, Iris. What's the latest news out of Trump's home base there in Florida?
Good evening to you as well, Steve. President-elect Trump tonight announced that former Wisconsin congressman and most recently a co-host of a Fox business show, Sean Duffy, will be his pick to lead the Transportation Department. The Transportation Secretary is the job that involves managing the nation's transportation system, as well as managing a vast budget and sweeping safety responsibilities. In a statement, Trump praises Duffy's work as a congressman in pushing for fiscal responsibility and rural development. Trump asked that Sean will help rebuild America's roads and bridges while ensuring our ports and dams serve our economy without compromising our national security and eliminating DEI for pilots and air traffic controllers. As Trump sets to announce more picks this week, he made several announcements over the weekend, including tapping Brendan Carr to lead the Federal Communications Commission. Carr, a Trump ally in the FCC, is a staunch big tech and China critic and has vowed to push back on censorship. Meanwhile, on Monday, Trump revealed more details on how he's going to carry out the plan for mass deportation of illegal immigrants. In a social media post, he confirmed that he would declare a national emergency to unlock military resources. In his first term, Trump also declared a national emergency on the border to use Pentagon funds for his border wall, prompting some lawsuits. His plan this time comes after he picked former ICE Director Tom Homan to be his border czar.
You better start packing now.
And President-elect Trump is in Palm Beach this week to continue building out his cabinet. Among the key posts he's yet to fill are secretaries of education and as well as the Treasury. Steve.
NTD's Iris Tao, thank you for that report. And speaking of the Department of Education, under the incoming Trump administration, what changes might we see in that department? NTD correspondent Jason Blair brings us more on what the president-elect says he intends to do.
President-elect Trump has numerous pledges and statements on his platform and Agenda 47 plan related to U.S. education, an area involving many hot topics of debate and headlines in recent years. One thing is Trump has said he plans to get rid of the federal Department of Education and bring power back to the states. If he were to completely get rid of the federal department or drastically reduce it, congressional approval would be needed. Trump has said while on the campaign trail that he might reduce it to just a few people. They would just be tasked with making sure schools are teaching basic subjects like English and arithmetic, as well as staying away from teaching, quote, woke material. Getting rid of the Department of Education is also something new Department of Government Efficiency co-head Vivek Ramaswamy has said he plans to recommend, something he's called for in the past as well. In Agenda 47, Trump also mentions a tuition-free higher education school called the American Academy.
Its mission will be to make a truly world-class education available to every American, free of charge, and do it without adding a single dime to the federal debt.
Trump says his administration will create it with, quote, billions of dollars that we will collect by taxing, fining, and suing excessively large private university endowments. He says some of these universities are, quote, turning our students into communists and terrorists and sympathizers of many, many different dimensions. According to Trump, the academy will offer the full and complete equivalent to a bachelor's degree and grant credit for previous coursework for transferees. Another pledge on his platform is to, quote, keep men out of women's sports. Trump will likely make an effort to undo Biden's changes to Title IX. Biden's alterations went into effect this year and changed what qualifies someone to enter gender-separated spaces in schools like locker rooms, as well as compete in gender-separated sports. Currently, those changes are on hold in 26 states.
I will ask Congress to pass a bill establishing that the only genders recognized by the United States government are male and female, and they are assigned at birth.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
And the Biden administration urging lawmakers today to quickly approve about $100 billion in emergency disaster relief funding. The request comes after severe storms have depleted those funds of several recovery assistance programs. The funding package includes $40 billion for FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund and more than $2 billion for the depleted Small Business Administration loan program. A senior administration official saying the request would be delivered to Congress as soon as today. The Biden administration has made multiple requests for more disaster aid since Congress last passed supplemental funding back in December of 2022. The director of the White House Office of Management and Budget says lawmakers have not acted despite multiple storms. Analysts say they expect up to $55 billion in insured losses from this year's hurricanes Helene and Milton. We turn now to the latest on the war in Ukraine. President Biden reportedly allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles to strike into Russia. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more from the White House.
President Biden allowing Ukraine to strike targets within Russia using American weapons represents a major policy change from previous months. Now, Ukraine is only allowed to strike within the Kursk region, which is Ukraine-occupied territory that belongs to Russia. As far as the timing of this comes right after a weekend barrage of missiles and drone attacks on Ukraine by Russia, as well as thousands of North Korean troops going into the Kursk region. Officials say Biden has allowed Ukraine to use American missiles to strike into the Kursk region of Russia. The missiles have a range of nearly 200 miles. Ukraine is only allowed to use these missiles in the Kursk region. Ukrainian troops have taken this region of Russia after the war began. This is the area that North Korea has been sending over 10,000 soldiers to aid Russia. President Biden urging G20 leaders to support Ukraine.
The United States strongly supports Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Everyone around this table, in my view, should as well.
Russian officials have condemned the decision, saying it risks an escalation in the war, and this would mean that the U.S. was directly involved in the conflict. The Hungarian foreign minister echoing the sentiment.
It is an incredibly dangerous decision to allow the usage of weapons provided to Ukraine by NATO member states against areas deep inside Russia. This clearly would bring the real threat of World War III very close.
Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky saying actions speak louder than words.
Today, much is being said in the media about us receiving permission for the relevant actions. But strikes are not made with words. Such things are not announced. The missiles will speak for themselves.
News of Biden's decision comes one day after Russia launched one of its largest attacks on Ukraine since the start of the war. Russia has deployed about 50,000 troops to the Kursk region. Allies hope Ukraine can hold on to this area to be used as a bargaining chip during potential peace talks. President-elect Donald Trump, who takes office in about 2 months, says he vows to end the war quickly. As far as President Biden, he met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping over the weekend on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Lima, Peru, where Xi told Biden that he's ready to work with the incoming Trump administration. Reporting from the White House, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And on the heels of APEC, the G20 today summit kicking off in Brazil. It's the last gathering President Biden is set to attend, a curtain call of sorts for President Biden. This as Trump is set to return to the White House. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar is in Rio de Janeiro.
President Biden on Monday meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum on the sidelines of the G20 summit. Now, Biden and Sheinbaum talked about the importance of working on immigration, security, and transnational crime. Topics that President-elect Trump will soon have to handle again, possibly by working with Mexico. And Biden also addressed the entire group of 20 during his opening remarks on Monday morning.
This is my last G20 summit. We've made progress together, but I urge you to keep going. I'm sure you will, regardless of my urging or not.
The first day of the G20 summit focused mostly on global hunger and poverty. President Biden announcing the largest ever contribution to the World Bank.
On Friday, we're announced the United States is pledging $4 billion over the next 3 years to the World Bank's International Development Association.
The $4 billion pledge exceeds the last U.S. contribution made in 2021 by $500 million. The G20 held its first session on Monday morning, which included the launch of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. The main topics this week are expected to be trade, climate change, and international security, such as ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. This comes just 2 weeks after former President Trump's decisive election victory. He's expected to implement policy changes in all three areas discussed at the G20. That's partly why some of the heads of state at the summit are reportedly focusing more on the transition to Trump rather than the outgoing administration. Chinese leader Xi Jinping is also in Rio this week. Practitioners of the spiritual belief Falun Gong held up banners in front of the G20 entrance on Sunday night. They gathered to raise awareness about the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of Falun Gong in China. But supporters of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, blocked their banners. The Brazilian Falun Gong practitioners say the CCP supporters told them to take down the banners, infringing on their freedom of speech rights. They also say the CCP supporters later followed them to the Uber and took a picture of the license plate. Now, the CCP has a history of harassing human rights activists at global events. They often send people to block banners, as they did here, for example. And in one instance, at the APEC summit in California last year, a CCP supporter even attacked one of our NTD journalists who was at the event. Reporting in Brazil, Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And New York-based Shenyun Performing Arts is about to embark on a new season of reviving traditional Chinese culture. Their tagline, China before communism. This is also what makes them a top target of the Chinese Communist Party. But this year, they aren't just facing diplomatic pressure on theaters or other forms of sabotage stemming from Chinese embassies and consulates across the country. They're facing attacks from the New York Times. According to Shenyun's website, Shenyun artists practice Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong. It's a practice that combines teaching for self-improvement and meditation exercises. The teachings are centered on three main principles: truth, compassion, and forbearance. The site goes on to say their spiritual practice is a source of inspiration for their performances.
There's never anything that's forced in any way, whether it's a teaching of Falun Gong or in the way that Shenyun is operated.
Earlier this year, 3 CCP whistleblowers said the CCP plans to escalate its efforts to suppress Falun Gong overseas. A cornerstone of the campaign is to manufacture allegations that would most likely trigger an investigation by U.S. authorities. The New York Times has published 5 articles targeting Shenyun and Falun Gong since August. Shenyun says they're riddled with inaccuracies. For example, 85% of Shenyun artists in its performing troops are adults, while the remaining are students performing as part of a practicum arrangement similar to an internship approved by the New York State Department of Education. But the latest New York Times article attempts to paint a picture that the company relies on minors and teenagers. That's just one example. Many of the student performers have had family members killed by persecution at the hands of the CCP. One question we'll be asking is why the Times is taking aim at this group rather than reporting in an in-depth manner into the atrocities that have been brought to these performers and their family members for the past 2 decades. Over the next few days, we'll hear from members of Shenyun Performing Arts themselves to explore why the New York Times, once America's paper of record, is targeting this group, and why all this matters in the big picture of U.S.-China relations, as well as how this may be linked to a larger plot of transnational repression orchestrated by the CCP. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.